Thank you, Mel. So here's how we do it, and I wanna make sure that everybody we got great two builders on my left and right, and I'm very excited to ask meaningful questions that hopefully make sense for everybody, and you get something out of something that can give you an insight within this job or the next job or in a career decision that you want to make for your own as well. So I'm holding my phone because I got my notes here, and I'm also waiting for questions to come in. I'll try to keep my question at a minimum. If there's more questions from the audience, so please feel free to send your questions on. And yeah, let me start with Pang-Yong quickly and ask you a question. We hear the term sovereign cloud all the time, and it's I want to say it's a bit newish. Because 5 years ago, I've never heard of what sovereign cloud is. I think there's some countries started with this initiative, but in your opinion, if you want to define to us in simple terms what is sovereign cloud and what is the need of it, how would you describe it?
I think it's hard to define in the simple terms because that keeps some of us in a job. As long as we make things complex and nobody else understands. I think that the starting point of sovereign cloud is really understand the concept of, so we have this thing called data residency, right? Put the data in country. Everybody understands that, right? Sovereignty is really about, can people take away what's yours? Right? Take away what's yours. I kind of look at, and many people kind of look at it from a security angle. Can people steal your data? I think it's less of an issue, right? That's a different issue. The question for at least those dealing with sovereign cloud, and 6GX is one of those parties. Our main concern is if there's a piece of data that belongs to the Singapore government, and these are citizen data, right? Data that's important to you. It could be birth information, it could even be criminal record and whatnot. So you don't want that to get out of the country in somebody's hand, right? How do you ensure you secure that? And the moment when something happens, can we walk in and say, this is my data? Nobody can take away our citizen data away from us. And that's really the key understanding of sovereignty. Now, the implementation of that is a different question. I'm not sure how long should I go about answering the question, but I think the quick one, I think the implementation of sovereign cloud is still evolving. Different people take different approach. There are people who are talking about confidential compute being the answer for sovereign cloud or sovereignty, but I think that requires some time for some of this so-called the industry to sort of figure out what's the real deployment or something. I think there's going to be a variety of different sovereign cloud deployments in the world. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for that. Rajay, the next question for you is, this is your second bank that you're kind of building, and it was impressive to see Trust Bank being built from A to Z, and you were on top of it. As a builder, what excites you about the job? Like, what excites you about building things from scratch? There's 1,000 decisions that you have to make. There's a lot of tools that you have to investigate. What makes you decide on a tool versus another at the end of the day, to be as part of that infrastructure that will build what the bank will run for the next 10 years, for example?
You're asking me to give my secrets away. No. So I think there are many things, right? When you're thinking about building something, I think sometimes you have to hedge some bets, right? So I can give you many examples, but I think, in my previous life, we did multi-cloud, of course, at Quarry. There were reasons behind it where we said, you need to pick the strengths of each cloud provider. I think the tools that you use, I heard a lot about developer experience, and I think we share a very common, interest. It's always about, removing friction, right? Technology is everywhere. I say this 100 times to everyone, right? What makes the difference is how do you make everything seamless, right? So picking the right technologies would mean, most of the innovation happens in that space of supply chain. And fundamentally, I think for me, it's always been, how do you remove the friction? How do you remove the friction? Because at the end of the day, you see these platforms coming around, and I remember we did OpenShift before, right? I remember that, about 7 years ago, 2015 and 16, we were one of the first to do it in Macquarie. And then I saw things changing. I saw the PaaS come in, I saw EKS, you've got Anthos, and then I saw the line of innovation going higher and higher towards the edge. And essentially, you want to remove all the toil away. So for me, I think technology is everywhere. What's really important is hedging your bets on the tools and technologies that you use, right? And making sure you can be as agnostic as possible. So I was asked the same question about, choosing to go on AWS, and everyone said to me, hey, what does it cost for you to move, right? It's always the question. And I said, look, as long as you're portable, as long as you understand that, and make sure that you're highly automated, right? It's fine. You might have to change, let's say, 20% of what you're building, right? And you asked to move to cloud, you can. How fast can you make sure that you're using, standards, open standards in the market? Like you mentioned, Kubernetes, of course. If you're using Istio, if you're using something from HashiCorp, it's all about making sure how do you tie these tools up together and make them work seamlessly. So moving the line of innovation to the edge, making sure that all the tools that you need are seamless, frictionless, are fundamental. In our case, we chose many technologies, of course. For our supply chain, we use a lot of harness. We get all that machine learning and everything built in, chaos engineering built in, cloud cost management. You can't be building everything. It's not possible, right? Of course, you are building things. You must be having great engineers with you. We have just under 100 engineers, right? We have a fixed amount of resources, time, cost to manage. So we pick partners very carefully. We experiment and learn quickly. We make sure, we can swap things out, do the right thing, follow the right principles, open source, standards, CNCF, really, really important.
Thank you. I know it's not my question, but just add on to the point.
Well, I want to ask you the same question as well.
Ask me the same question. I thought Rajay earlier shared about people. I think ultimately you can build all the tools you want. Tools going to change, right? Be COBOL, whatever, 2-tier, 3-tier, microservices, you name it, right? The industry going to change. But I think once you can build people capacity, building up teams, and those teams will ride a wave with you, right? They will figure out how to adapt the sets of technology, and then that become a conversation, different conversation. I also agree on the friction. The friction is the hard one. How do you deal with the friction? A lot of times, again, the focus has always been about what's the cost of one or two things, or what's the cost of migration. People, and certain things are not very, you can't quantify it as well. The cognitive load of developers to learn new skills, the drop in productivity. I know there are certain metrics that measure that today, but I think ultimately, how do you sort of making sure that people can go with you that journey of change? I felt that's always the most important consideration. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Peng Yong. So since we're still with you, I want to ask you the next question. I like in your slides, you said, don't be religious. But whether we like it or not, you will face and part of us being engineers, that we're always super interested about the tech, and that makes us unbiasedly religious. Yeah. But how do you deal with this with your team, for example? What is the right, and I'm sure you had this multiple times in this job or the previous job, how do you control this? What is the right step to do to unfold it?
It's a good question. I read a book some point ago, and the author says human is actually the most adaptable species in the world, right? We're able to live in a cold climate, a warm climate, any climate you can live on Earth, right? But yet we had that huge resistance to change. Nobody likes changes. We like to do the same thing. I think the big part, and that's really my innovation hat, is really how do you create a culture, create a safe space for people to speak up, and understanding that what's holding them back from making those changes. And a lot of them are very real. And the fact is, people don't feel secure about learning new technology. And bear in mind, there's so much noise in the market, right? So you hear, like CNCF, a perfect example, right? I'm not sure, every 2 months there's a new project from CNCF. I don't know, right? Even I struggle with figuring out the change. I think it's really, how do you create a safe space for a team and then bring them through that journey? And it was the journey for us, a really, really difficult journey. We started by outsourcing everything, and it was a slowly journey to find opportunities, to start to pull some stuff back and say, look, we can build internal team and create success along the way. And you need success to get your management to support you, and that's a reality of life. Yeah.
And the same question for Rajay. I'm sure during your building phases, you'll be working with a bit of religious person on some sort of a tool that you're trying, and you know that this will derail the plan. How do you deal with this? Is it more like convince me or I convince you? Is it more like no, you just enforce the idea on the team and let them work it? What is the right approach in your opinion?
I think, again, it comes down to the culture, right? If you're going to enforce everything, then the community that you have are not going to be able to express them freely. So I think, for us, we allow okay, so I know that developers, right, love to pick their tool of choice. Somebody will say, I want IntelliJ, somebody's going to say, I use Visual Source Safe or whatever, right? I find that, there is no end to the choices, right? But as long as you have a community that can actually consider all the options and present the options to you, you will be able to ensure that it's like open source. You'll find people gravitating to some things, right? But in some cases, you don't have a choice. In some cases, you're going to allow the freedom of choice. In some cases, you have to enforce, right? Like standards are enforced. You'll find the tools can be changed in your pipeline. You allow that change to happen organically. And every time, like you said, every 6 months to a year, you'll find a new tool coming on. But what I find is hedging your bets with the open source is a good way to look at how the trends are going, right? And you mentioned CNCF, but if you look at chaos engineering, you look at any other standards, there are standards in the market, right? And then you'll find which one do I invest in. But the community is making those decisions for you in many cases, right? So you try and hedge your bets with the community. You try and make the right choices and fundamentally allow the teams to express themselves in what tools and technologies they want to use. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful. You'll not be able to build a culture that can thrive, right?
I like it. So community and adoption of community is a major...
I think it is really important, really, really important to understand where the community is going.
My second question or third question to both of you before we start moving on to audience questions is, when you started in multicloud back in Macquarie Bank, what was the driver behind your thinking? Because there was, like back in the day, if you look at 5, 7, 8 years ago, there was no regulation from a banking industry that you need to be on a cloud or 2 or 3, but you did it out of your own. What was the benefit? Why did you do that? What was the driver to do this in the first place?
I think every cloud has its strength. So I'll go back to my previous life, right? We found at that time, right, there was a lot of advancements in Anthos, and Kubernetes was leading the way, and actually AWS was following at that time. And we were already container-led. We were on Red Hat OpenShift 2015. We had to deploy our own PaaS at that time. But then we found that, Google was making a lot of advancements. And the second thing you found is, in terms of data, there were a lot of strengths there, be it APIs for AML, APIs for voice, anything that you picked there, you found there was a lot of advancements there. So at that time, the bank took the decision to say, look, we are going, at Macquarie, there were, I think today there were more than 90% on the cloud, right, at Macquarie in Australia. But we decided that we're going to hedge our bets with two cloud providers. And of course, everyone has Azure as well, right, because of Microsoft being in every organization. But there we realized that we could have data bunkers across two cloud providers, and we found that we could harness the strengths with each provider. That's how I see it, and that's how I think the market definitely sees it. But there is risk in having just one, right? Of course, there's always a risk.
And the same question to you, Panyong. Like, and I know in your application is a bit different because you are creating the one sovereign cloud. But what is your opinion on the ability to use different technologies from different clouds, or put all the eggs in one basket with a single cloud, but probably have the depth in it?
I think, as I shared earlier, the context matters. So I was running a startup. The startup is quite straightforward, right? You have no option to invest in multi-cloud. Say, look, you're going to stick with one. What's the most popular? Who give you the most credits? Happen to be AWS. Let's go with it, and then bang, off you go. I think as organization mature, that's when you start to develop and say, look, what's the problem you've got to deal with. So in our context, is as I shared earlier, when a region fail in Singapore, then there's no other option for us but to fail to another cloud service provider. So that's really the premise for us making this decision. But the question, of course, with that is cost, right? It does come with lots of costs in terms of training the people, in terms of the lack of efficiency of, in terms of some of the common services that we build. But again, it's always those perennial questions. You want efficiency, you can take the risk of the lack of efficiency, right? Or lack of resiliency in this case. So those are really the hard decision. So our approach as a government, or most government sectors, is really looking at multi-cloud. We continue to look at multi-cloud as a strategy. Even for us, when we can't have a layer-out solution, where the commercial cloud world, we call GCC, there's different flavors within that. And then we have a sovereign cloud approach, and then we continue to stick to some on-prem approach, because there are real situations that we have to think about on-prem solution as well. So that's really how we approach it. Yeah.
Hey, Ned, can I add something here? I just remembered, actually, this is an interesting one. So when I came to Trust, we were looking for an API gateway, right? So at Macquarie, we were very comfortable with Apogee. And we took Apogee in Macquarie, and it was deployed on AWS, of course. And of course, later on Google, because Google bought Apogee, right? So here we use Apogee, but the control plane sits in Google, right? And we deploy, they give you standard ways to deploy your application, but the control plane sits in Google. So it's very interesting how the way, I do, know what's going on in the industry, but I'm sure you read a lot. But the fact that you have, portability today with Kubernetes, it changes the playing field, because I think in future you'll have a lot more of that. There's no reason why these cloud providers are not going to start packaging and bundling their softwares and making sure that, hey, you want to use BigQuery, you can actually deploy it in AWS and use it. I see that's a possibility in future. Never say never, but in my mind, because of the platforms that you have today, I think it's a game changer. And somewhere down the line, you can quote me, but I think you will have that, where portability will be normal.
Maybe just to add on to that, I think the big challenge that at least what I'm worried about is we can do lots of stuff at the app container plane and stuff there. The big challenge is really data has gravity, right? You kind of say, look, as your data grows, that probably become quite difficult. There's always some of those challenges. And then say, look, especially you go into the AI, ML world where you have massive amount of data, are you willing to foot that bill to give yourself that portability when necessary? That's really some of these thinking parameters that different organizations have to figure out kind of along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when in my personal chat with a lot of CIOs and CTOs in the market, when I ask them what's the first thing on your mind, they say the data portability. How do we solve the data portability problem? Yeah. So I got a lot of questions coming for both of you. So let's start from Timothy to Rajay. Why Sentinel policy, not OPA? And how did Trust Bank evaluate the choice, if they had to evaluate the choice, of course?
So I'm not so sure you have many choices here. So of course, you can decide how to implement all your policies at runtime, or you can decide, what code scanners you want to use, or we have lots of scanners that we use, but for configuration also, nowadays you have real-time scanners, right? We use Orca. It's similar name, by the way. Cloud runtime security, you can have that. In this case, you want to prevent it, so prevention, preventive measures as well. So in this case, we were already using HashiCorp, Terraform. So it made sense to add on all these tools that are available already. But I'm not so sure I can answer that in any other way. But obviously you want to prevent anything from happening. The lifecycle management is really important. So I would say, you know, it was a de facto choice for us to use it.
And yeah, and we don't stop, like even just adding on this, we integrate with OPA as well. So when you talk to the HashiCorp team, if you've already, we always talk to teams who already developed and they were on OPA for a long time. We just like, we don't want you to reinvent the wheel, and we'll just integrate with you. Anonymous question to Pan Yong, and I think I'm trying to understand the question, but I'll read it. Maybe that will help us both again. Since HTX developed tools for the home team, do the HTX team face challenges adopting public cloud? And how do HTX overcome these challenges?
So today we're on public cloud. We call it government on commercial cloud. Essentially, that's a public cloud platform, right? We're on AWS, primarily Azure, a little bit on GCP. We're trying to find a journey. The biggest challenge for us is still go back to, honestly, it's the same challenge like all organizations, right? How do we deal with the security controls, making sure the data doesn't leak out? How to ensure that the developers have the right devices connecting to the cloud? Nothing different. And we kind of, and there are bigger implications. So, for example, we talk about Azure downtime that happen, and you need a comedy or errors for those to happen. When some of these things happen, there's natural questions. Say, why are we putting stuff on the cloud, and how do you deal with the public feedback about such things? So I think a lot of this is about having the right sorts of policy to manage some of these challenges. I'm not sure the challenge question is related to technical or
it doesn't mention just.
Yeah, but I think we're on it, and we continue to develop skills on top of our tool sets on top of our commercial cloud.
Okay. Now, this is a question to the panelists, so I'm happy both of you can answer separately. So is there any difference between an internal developer platform and a cloud delivery platform?
So I think I'll go first. I came up with a cloud delivery platform terminology, so I actually trademarked it. The reason we came up with new terminology because we sort of recognize IDP is still an evolving category and probably solve a set of problem. And we kind of see, look, the whole experience for platform engineering is about pulling a whole bunch of tools together. So can IDP be part of so-called CDP? Definitely yes, right? It could be another tool set that say, look, I want to give a kind of on-premise Heroku-like experience. More happy for someone to bring an IDP to it. But again, the question is, remember the BS 2x2? The question is how much you want to weigh out the benefits of adaptability versus abstraction for the developers. So I hope that can answer the question.
I think, at the end of the day, you're going to have multiple tools. And you're going to have a lot of orchestration, right? But what you're seeing a lot of is backstage. You're seeing that having multiple tools is inevitable. And for developers to make decisions, for developers to be productive, you've got to be able to surface all the information from about, at least 10 to maybe 30 different, sources, so that, the decision, you get better insights, so you can make decisions at real time. So your asset management, your governance, right, your compliance, security, all this information, there's thousands of data around, right? So I think you'll find that it's now inevitable that organizations will either customize, right, something that allow that data to surface in a single pane of glass, or you're going to have multiple tools that you're going to use. But I can't see that simplification happen otherwise. You'll have to engineer it. You'll have to, make it yours with your context. I remember you saying about the context, right? Really important. We're a bank. We have a context. We have different tools. We have different ecosystem. So I think, cloud platforms and tools will mature, but you will always have to work hard to make sure that, you can surface all this information for your developers.
I just add on to that point. I think important is not to say there's one tool to rule them all. There's no such thing. We kind of break down a problem and say, which are the planes, right? You have a developer plane, you have a resource plane, you have a security plane, you have a CI/CD plane, and what makes sense across those planes, and how sort of they are connected together. So that's really a way we kind of frame and look at the problem. Yeah.
Well, we're on time, but there's just one last question came in, and that's for Rajay, and if you can answer it as quick as you can. So, what is the unit of measurement on future release frequency in Trust Bank? Is it minutes, hours, days, or weeks?
So the change, you mean frequency of change. I would say we have. I would say days, depends on how fast you want to respond. You could do hours, but we have all the practices in place. So we have something called, we call it lab, beta, and prod. Right? Lab is maybe just the developer's going to go into production, make some changes, check it at a service level. Then you have beta, where you have maybe 200-300 people who have access to that, and then you have prod. So something like dark launches. So that enables you to segment all your services. Segment your user base and use a lot of A/B testing strategies, a lot of versioning strategies, a lot of API versioning strategies to release your code quickly. But we work on the head, so we are constantly deploying, and then we use feature flags to open it up. So there are many strategies you can use. But long story short, I would say we have. I think, if I'm not mistaken, average day for mobile releases in banking industry is about once a month, maybe, or more. We do about 9 to 15 mobile changes and delivery. So I would say days, but we are pretty fast. I hope I'm right there, but yeah, we're pretty fast. That's how we iterated. And all these experiences you see, we're constantly iterating.
And I gotta ask you, like, from a unit of measurement for HTX, for example, what do you anticipate?
To be honest, we are struggling with that. You still go back to someone pretty senior in the organization asked this question. We kind of like to say, hey, you know what? We're agile, great. The big bosses say, great, fantastic. And my response to the different people was, the reality is we still operate a very waterfall model in our structure. So certain parts of the organization can be agile, but the broader organization in terms of user doing acceptance testing, the availability of people, the willingness of our stakeholders, our users, to accept a faster pace, they're not ready for it. So today, we are doing stuff in days, but to be honest, the big challenge is really how do you enlighten our users to really take a different approach to some of these things. So it's still a very difficult journey for us, yeah.
But I want to thank both of you. Panyong, thank you very much for your time. And Rajay, thanks a lot. Appreciate everyone's. And if you have more questions, please feel free. We'll be around, and we'll see everybody shortly after this. Mel, back to you.